More Than Rich podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We have the privilege of hosting Jack Kammer. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Mr. Kammer?
Yeah, perfect. Very
Pioneering
good.
advocate for male gender issues and seasoned social worker. Dedicated decades to exploring and addressing the unique challenges faced by men and boys in society. Early days hosting a groundbreaking radio show to influential books that challenge traditional narratives about gender dynamics. I understand your work has sparked vital conversations and brought impactful insights, is specifically why I was trying to get you on here. So one of the crazier things that I noticed, first of all, was I was going through all the charts and the data that you were sending me, and I just want to jump off with this crazy insight before we even get into your background. But a lot of the stuff you were sending me is from 2004, right? And I researched even more like recent data, and the graphs you were showing me are super startling. Like African American overall trends, when we're talking about suicide rates, incarceration rates, educational outcomes, economic, it's pretty drastic compared to any other. I'm just like curious on your overall just background on how you started on that, because that's really why I wanted to, interview you today.
Well, really two reasons. One is less important, and that is strategically, people like me, white guys, who want to talk about the disadvantages of being male, often hear, "Oh, what do you white guys have to complain about? You run the world. And you white guys are just upset about losing your white male privilege. That's why you're concerned about what you call sexism against men, and stereotypes of men, and unfair policies toward men." So the lesser reason, but still important, is that by saying, no, actually, take a look at what's happening to the least powerful men in our society. Black men are not in jail because they're privileged as men. They are in jail much more than black women, who both suffer the same racism. But the reason black men are much more in jail than than black women, is the same reason that there are more white men in jail than white women. It's because there are a lot of disadvantages to being male, regardless of your race. And we need to acknowledge that it's not all privilege and power and getting exactly what you want because you're male, regardless of your race.
That's interesting.
Black men get a terrible 1-2 punch. Now, I'm sure that this is podcasting, and so I can say a 4-letter word, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
No,
I live and work in Baltimore. Baltimore's a pretty rough town. I was a jail guard in the infamous Baltimore City Detention Center for a year. I was a parole and probation agent in Central Baltimore for a year. I worked for National Fatherhood for a year, training correctional people how to run the Inside Out Dad program for incarcerated fathers. And it's, just very clear that there has to be a male gender component to the problems of black men. And that gender component is also a gender component that affects other types of men, namely white men, Latino men, Asian men. And, it's really interesting how this point of view, this sort of mind and thought experiment that we put people through. Oprah Winfrey is very highly implicated in this, because I have a friend named Fred Hayward, who's really brilliant, just a brilliant guy. He's been doing men's issues for a long time. And he was on the TV circuit, on the Group W TV stations. Group W stood for Westinghouse. Westinghouse owned a bunch of TV stations. One of them was in Baltimore. Oprah Winfrey, before she moved to Chicago, to national stardom, she was a big deal here locally in Baltimore. And she did a show called People Are Talking. People Are Talking had Fred Hayward on as a guest. And the way Oprah introduced the show, introduced Fred, was by saying something to the effect of, well, we all know that men don't have any gender issues,
No.
but there's this guy named Fred Hayward who wants to talk about it anyhow. Welcome, Fred Hayward.
Downplayed him.
Well, big time, big time. And he said to her, Oprah, I'm on your show because this is important to me. And you're basically saying my life's work right now is nothing. Let me ask you a question, Oprah. If I were to point out to you that there were more blacks in jail than whites, how would you respond to that? And she said something like, well, that would tell me that blacks are under more social and economic pressure than whites are. Fred said, yeah, good. Now, and I think the proportion of blacks and whites to jail was something like 8 times as many blacks in jail proportional to their population as whites. Now, this was back in the day. It was, I think, in the late
I'm just
70s.
amazed. I'm amazed that she has to have this explained to her, though.
So, well, she's a woman, and, the sisterhood is powerful, and, men are okay, but they're not as great as we women are. So, if they're in jail, well, it's because, they're doing something wrong. They're dogs. They're just not as good as we are. We're angels, and we never do anything wrong, and so that's why we're not in jail. So after he pointed out, or he got her to acknowledge that blacks are 8 times as likely to be in jail as whites, proportional to the population, he said, good, Oprah, that's good. Now, proportional to the population, it's changed since then, but back when he confronted her on this, he said, proportional to the population, there are 19 times as many men in jail as women. What does that tell you? Of course, it should tell anybody, well, men are under more social and economic pressure than whites are. And, a lot of the reasons men get locked up is because they're trying to make some money by any means necessary. Dealing drugs, robbing banks, stealing purses, whatever. Very, very often it's about trying to make money. Well, after he pointed this out to her, Fred is very charitable towards Oprah in this, because he says, okay, well, now she thinks I'm a racist. Besides being a male chauvinist pig, now she thinks I'm a racist. And so that's why she reacted so badly. But her reaction was to go like this. and to refuse to continue the interview.
Wow.
And so they broke to a commercial. The producer came over to Fred and said, Fred, I'm sorry, this is not going the way we planned.
For anyone listening, she was basically dismissive with her arms crossed and wasn't interacting.
Right. Oh yeah, there's no audio, there's no video.
No, we're doing video, but there's also audio.
Right. There's also right. Okay. So it's not going the way we planned, and of course, the way they planned was that Oprah, the super smart, super progressive, super brilliant woman, is going to really put it to this dumb, troglodyte, ignorant man who thinks that there is such a thing as sexism against men. And so they cut to a commercial, they kicked him off the show, and they filled the rest of his time with the earth-shattering importance of chicken recipes. Apparently, they were going to have a chef come on after Fred's segment. And so they just rolled out the kitchen and had him do 2 dishes instead of 1. I guess. I don't know. But
a lot easier to manipulate back then, too, huh?
Well, yeah, because that's a good point, because I have tried to find video of this event. and I just can't find it. But I have had it
Damn.
corroborated by two of Fred's friends. I didn't even know Fred at this time that he was on Oprah's show, but I have spoken to two of his friends who were watching, eagerly to see Fred on the show, and they both corroborated, substantially with the same scenario.
So backing up a little bit,
so
when we
let me finish this. Let me mention the second reason that I'm interested in the problems of African American men. Aside from the strategic reason of being able to say, look, black men are in jail more than black women because of sexism, not because of race, because both black men and black women are facing the same racism. That's the less important reason. The more important reason is that it's the right thing to do for a lot of reasons. It's socially important. Some of our worst social problems, I believe, are tied up with the fact that black men can't catch a break. I've said I was going to mention a 4-letter word. I'm in Baltimore, an East Coast city, pretty rough, and I was shocked to learn, but it's true, and I've had it corroborated multiple times by black men. Black men hear every day, black men ain't shit. And guess what? They're not hearing that from the Ku Klux Klan.
It's from their
They're not hearing it because they're black. Yes, exactly, their own race. They're not hearing it because they're black. They're hearing it because they're men. And when you live in a society, in a neighborhood, in a social milieu, where the only way you can avoid being shit is to have a lot of money, and I'm not saying that that's the only thing. That men are valued for.
It's just the easiest, most shallow, upfront thing. Yeah.
I mean, look, there are a lot of really good black women out there who are very understanding and supportive of black men, but there are a lot of women of all races who just want to get what they can get because
Absolutely.
They think they're special and they're privileged and they deserve it. So
you're not singling anyone out, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not singling anybody out. And again, there are some really good black women, but the squeaky wheels are getting the grease.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. So I think that we could make our country a whole lot happier and a whole lot healthier with a whole lot less poverty if we would value for men, this is paradoxical, the less we value men only for their money, the more money they will make.
Wow.
The more we connect men's hearts to their kids.
It sounds like you're saying caring about them will drive them to prove you whether it's like right, wrong. It'll drive them to make you money.
Yeah. Forbes magazine had an article that I think is very right that said the number one thing for keeping people working hard on the job is appreciation. The number one thing, more than money, more than benefits, the number one thing is just being appreciated.
It's so interesting you said that because that all went away when everything became super giant and corporate, like when everything was a lot smaller, of course you can appreciate. But when everyone became dispensable and replaceable and you're just a number at that point.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, income inequality is way out of control.
Yeah, you're right. I just got one detail.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there's a connection between what you said and income inequality.
And wage housing and all that.
All of that. And I think I have an MBA because I thought I was going to be able to, and a master's in social work. And I got both of those in a dual degree program because I was hoping I'd be able to get a job in an agency of some sort where I could sort of advocate these issues that nobody's paying any attention to. So anyhow, in my MBA program, we had an opportunity to hear a talk by a fellow from Britain. and he was talking about, corporations and how they sometimes do bad things, sometimes do good things too. They certainly employ a lot of people. But, I asked him, I said, in Britain, is there sort of an unwritten rule for CEOs that they need to focus really intently on their duty to maximize shareholder value? And is that regarded in Britain the way it is here? That's the number one thing that CEOs have to do for fear of being sued by their stockholders or being kicked out by their stockholders. No matter what else you have to do to mess up your society, if you maximize shareholder value by polluting the world, that's okay, as long as you can get away with it, or as long as you can find a loophole in the laws, or as long as you can have your lobbyists squelch the laws. It's not
really
good.
Kills the innovation, honestly. When you're a CEO and you got to focus all your attention on making money for people, especially when being creative is what got you where you're trying to get to.
Well, look, money can be a great incentive, and I think it's why we are a much more dynamic society than Russia, for instance, where the old joke was among the workers: we pretend to work, and they pretend to pay it. We pretend to work, and they pretend to pay us.
Man,
it was just a completely lousy system. Money is a good incentive, but there's a statue, I think it's out in front of the Commerce Department in Washington, D.C., and it shows a couple of, I think it's two, might be just one, really big, strong horses. And then there's a man on the ground with reins just trying to restrain it a little bit, control it, tame it a little bit. And the idea is that in a free economic society like the United States, for the most part, you got a lot of people who feel free and incentivized to make money. They're going to be like a very strong horse, and they can do bad things, be selfish, be irresponsible. And the man on the ground with the reins was the Commerce Department, saying, yeah, we want big, strong horses, but they gotta, sort of play nice. And, people who say, oh, we shouldn't have regulations because it kills business. Well, some businesses should be killed, first of all. And, just imagine how much fun the NFL would be. What's your favorite sport?
Basketball.
Okay. Imagine the NBA without referees. How much fun would that be? How much excitement would that be?
I mean, it started off as a blood sport in the cages, if you remember that.
Well, I know it was called the Cagers, right?
Yes. No, I mean, the actual sport itself, where they would like play in a cage and they were like bleeding and stuff. It was like brutal when it first started.
There was no out of bounds. It was fenced completely all around. Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm sure that the first time they started talking about taking the cage down, there were probably people who said, "Oh, that's a bunch of sissies, man."
It's
right?
True. Yeah.
And Pudge Heffelfinger was the Heisman Trophy being given back then in 1890, or maybe he was just an All-American. When Pudge Heffelfinger was a big football player for Yale, and back before 1890, football players didn't wear helmets. And when it started becoming a rule that football players were going to be wearing helmets, Pudge Heffelfinger said, "None of that sissy stuff for me."
Yeah, I was literally going to say that pads were the good example. He was 3-time consensus All-American.
Yeah.
1888, 1891. Pretty good.
Yeah. So no sissy stuff for him. So look, we need big, strong horses, and we need big, strong cowboys to tame them. To get them to do the most socially valuable and productive thing.
And we can't just trust that they're going to do that either.
Exactly. Yes. Trust but verify. Yeah, we got regulations. Now we can do this easy way or the hard way. I'm going to be in here and I'm going to be inspecting, and you can try to fool me, and you might be able to get away with it for a couple of years, but when we catch you, we're going to tear you down. I mean, that's the way it ought to be, I think.
Coming back a little bit to like the gender problems, what I noticed is, I think what you're trying to get at is that a lot of people focus and blame race when these are like human gender, like male problems that we're not addressing, right? Like it seems like a way to deter from the main arguments, and there's probably some invested interest in keeping that going. But also the other thing is, I'd compare it to politics in that aspect. The fact that we like blame race is just a talking point.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Clinton took this bold, creative, forward-thinking step. We were going to have a national conversation on race. Well, everybody's afraid to talk about race.
Why? Why is that?
Because you can be accused of being a racist.
It's kind of like religion, huh? In politics, like I'm saying, like nobody agrees eye to eye on these things.
Well, it's, the status quo is held by a certain group of powerful people, and they want to keep the status quo. If you are a professor of African American studies at some, big university, and somebody wants to say, you're right, professor, Black studies are really important, but, it's not the only thing that's harming Black society these days. It's not just the legacy of slavery. And actually, sir, if you wanted to look at the legacy of slavery, it would be valuable to point out, to have you recognize that slavery was horrible for both slave men and slave women, but it was horrible differently. Because when a slave woman was raped by her white master, that was horrible, but it wasn't her fault. Nobody blamed her. When a male slave couldn't protect his children, it wasn't his fault, but he was consumed with the feeling that he should have been able to do something. He should be able to do something. And that pent up frustration.
Burning resentment. It's another level of resentment. You can't even.
And it becomes self-hate. And then it becomes, it becomes generations later as, Black men are completely without efficacy. And they ain't shit. But think of what happened to the Black male psyche under slavery. And we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about. It's ugly. It's sad.
So
it's terrible.
How did that quote even get developed? Of Black women just
that Black men ain't shit.
Yeah.
Well, I think for a lot of reasons. Black men were discriminated against in a lot of decent paying positions. They had trouble getting in the
it's
unions.
a hit them where it hurts kind of insult. Then we can't even do anything about that.
If you're a Black woman and you got some kids and you're trying to feed them, you can get pretty angry, pretty fed up, pretty hurtful, and you might be impelled to say whatever you need to say to try to get this man to go out and get money by any means necessary. And if it means he goes to jail, well, at least the kids are eating. It's a freaking mess. It's a freaking mess. And we don't want to talk about the gender component of our worst problems.
That's real.
And we need to.
So can we talk about your early influences? Because I know you mentioned how just getting into it on hearing the same things over and over about like, what do you know? You're white. So I'm trying to understand like your interest getting into it, maybe some things you saw that made it stand out.
Well, I can tell you some things I felt, which might even be even better.
Let's go as young as you can remember.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. You know how it's bad when people say to little girls who are good at sports or good at math or good at science, and it doesn't happen so much. It doesn't happen so much anymore because we've learned when people say to a little girl who's good at math, gee, Susie, you're really good at math, ... Say it. What's the rest of it?
No, it's degrading. I don't even know. Nope, not.
You're really good at math for a girl, right? We know that that's wrong, right?
Yeah.
One of my earliest memories is when I was a little boy, what I used to hear was, gee, Jack, you're really good with babies. ...
Dang. What does that even mean? For a guy? Like men are...
For a boy.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're really good with babies for a boy. Now, you know, what's the purpose of telling girls that they're good at math ... for a girl? It's sort of a way, I guess it's one of the first microaggressions. You know, it's a left-handed compliment. It's not really a compliment. It's really saying, is there something wrong with you?
Or I didn't expect that out of you, right? Like just something's off on you.
Are you a freak? And you know, and that's even in the light of the fact that
it's a good way to interpret that.
Being a girl who likes to climb trees and put frogs in her pocket, that's a tom girl, right? And there's a certain cachet to being a tom girl, certain panache. You know, we sort of admire tom girls. Yeah, she's really gutsy. Yeah,
takes initiative for sure.
Yeah. Take a boy who doesn't like to put frogs in his pocket, but, you know, really prefers, you know, something that girls like to do. What do you call him?
I don't know.
Begins with an S.
I don't know.
A sissy.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm not following. I got you.
A sissy.
Yeah.
Now, if you...
I would have said wimp.
Well, sure. There you go, too. And, you know, they need to man up at the age of 4.
Damn. Used to be a real reality.
So, you know, even though being a tom girl is, you know, in some ways kind of something to be proud of, we know you don't tell a little girl, you know, you're really good at math or sports for a girl. We don't yet know that we shouldn't tell little boys, you're really good with babies for a boy. Now, there's the status quo. There are in my view, two main realms of human happiness, accomplishment, fulfillment. One is the one that women keep pointing to, that used to belong exclusively to men. The economy, the government, careers, money, jobs, all of that stuff. All of which is good. Not all of which. Well, all of it's good, except some of it's good in bad ways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
for dating, for example.
For dating? Yeah. If you want to, yeah. Well, we should talk about, I mean, this is called More Than Rich, right?
Yeah.
Where's a very strong signal to men that the only rich you should be thinking about is making money. That's very closely tied to the rather anachronistic, but still very, very in effect today, tradition. Should we call it a tradition or a scam?
Damn.
or a racket that men should pay for dates. Well, the person who asks should be the one who pays. And then the answer to that, of course, is, well, Susie, when you ask your friend Betty to go out with you for drinks on a Friday night, does she expect you to pay because you asked her? Why is it a rule? Why is it a rule for men but not for women? We're trying to be equals here, aren't we?
If it's something I didn't want to do, right? It's like, damn, now I have to pay for something I don't even want to do.
Yeah. So this is more than rich. And I love your show, and I love the purpose of your show. And it's so needed. It's so important. And you're brave for doing it. Because, you could see a lot of women talking about shows about smelling the roses and stuff. But, you're a guy, and you're talking about, you're not so crazy about this whole idea that what you mostly should focus on in your life so that you can be, quote unquote, a success.
Yeah.
Is money.
To be honest, yeah, because as a kid, it consumed me so bad. Like, I did a lot of bad things. I ruined relationships because I thought it was the most important thing, right? And I was under that illusion that if I don't, in this next 24 hours, if I'm not in some way contributing or getting something, then I'm in some way falling behind. And that's a horrible way to live your life, honestly.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Now, right now, it's two guys talking about the fact that men are pressured big time to overinvest in making money. But there's a whole lot more than just two of us.
Absolutely.
But we are not encouraged to speak up. Oh, what's wrong with you? You really don't make much money, ... for a boy.
Yeah. Change some child labor laws. We'll change it.
Yeah. So that was one of the earliest memories I have of just knowing there was something wrong.
What's a better way, though? What's a better way that someone could have said that to you? What's the more appropriate?
What would have been more appropriate would have been to say, wow, Jack, that is so great to see a boy being really good with babies, because being good with babies and maybe one day you'll want to grow up to be a daddy. That's one of the most important and happy things you can possibly ever do in your life.
Does the fact that someone's young really matter, though? Is that worth pointing out? Wow, you're so young and doing something like this. Compassion at a young age is pretty compelling, right?
Does it it mattered to me. I don't think they wanted it to matter in any good way. But it certainly mattered to me that here I was doing something I really liked, because I love babies. They're just fun. Mm-hmm. Something that I was really good at, something that made me happy. And they're sort of giving me this idea that, it's that biblical verse. When I became a man, I gave up childish things. And they read that at weddings. They read that at weddings. So it's basically like telling the groom, okay, well, now that you're married, quit having fun.
Damn.
No childish things. No childish things. Get out there and make money.
That's so real.
Yeah, it's just not, the way it ought to be. Now, look, there is a hopeful piece of this. But again, it's the squeaky wheels getting the grease. There are lots of really successful women making good money and having pretty good lives because they're making money doing something they care about. They're being scientists and they're being professors, and they are being business people, and it makes them feel good. They're being good lawyers. It makes them feel good, but they can keep it in balance. You probably don't remember this because you're too young, but when I was your age, there was no such phrase as work-life balance. When men were the primary ones slaving away in the corporations for at least 40 hours a week, but if you want to be a success, you got to be working 50, 60, 70, 80.
You just worked. That you just knew to wake up and work.
Yeah, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's how you showed your love for your family. You were a provider, not a provider of love and your heart and your soul and your wisdom and your knowledge and your values.
That's the bonus.
Well, yes. But of course, it's a bonus that you got to cram into the other 2.5 hours of your week,
Yeah.
But the good news is that there are lots of women who are successful in both realms, and they're trying to balance in both realms. And they would love to find men who are balanced, in the other side of what male balance needs to be about. Men who place a really high importance on love and nurturance, generativity, parenting, and at the same time are also interested in having some accomplishments outside the home, for personal fulfillment, to be making some money. But here's the rub that I have found. Even the women who say, "Oh, come on, there's women all over the place who are looking for men to do their, quote, fair share around the house." Well, first of all, that makes it sound like drudgery.
Yeah.
Rather than acknowledging that being a parent can be a lot of fun, especially if you have somebody who's a good partner in that with you. But, they say, you will hear women say, "Oh, come on, women just can't get men to stop focusing on money. Oh, it's their male egos."
One of the things that I tell my sister and my mom all the time, like random stories about just how the dating world is right now, just to give them like a glimpse. And they'll often be like, "I cannot imagine like if I had to go back like right now or had to start dating again." And there's this huge trend of like, quote, passport bros, right? Where guys are going overseas to go find traditional, quote, women. And I'm curious your perspective on that, just how that's been changing and how women would prefer to not change that aspect of themselves, even if that does mean their mating options are leaving.
My guess is that when they say they want traditional women, what they are saying is they are looking for sexy babes. Yeah.
That's the quote of the podcast right there. That's a good one.
And look,
Might be some truth.
And women are implicated in this too. I mean, look, if I wanted to entice you or welcome you or invite you, make it the nicest way you can, into having a lifelong relationship with me, to try to convince me that I was going to be a good partner for you, even when you're 80 years old and I'm 79. Would you emphasize how sexy you are as one of your main attributes? I mean, it's sort of like, it's going to spoil. It's not going to last 80 years or 60 years if you're 20 when you're dating. It's not going to last 60 years. And so, women really shoot themselves in the foot when they make sexiness the thing that they most think men are going to want. Now, I'm not saying men don't want sexiness. Men do want sexiness.
Yeah, from the most basic gene aspect.
Yeah. I mean, it's just sort of a biological thing that there is an association between a sexy babe and a fertile babe. It's just true. But there's also truth in the idea that there is a connection between a nice guy and a good father. And if you're looking to have kids, madam, and then grandkids, if you're looking for fulfillment of your nurturing, your supposed mothering instinct that men have just as strong as a fathering instinct, if you're looking to, fulfill that, you want to have more than a man who is working 80 hours a week to make money. And he's not doing it because of his ego. He's doing it because that's the message he got about how he shows his love for you and for his kids. So I want to wind back a little bit. There are many women who say they're looking for these kinds of guys who are interested in work-life balance and really want to prioritize their relationships with their kids and really want to develop their skills and talents and abilities and their joys as parents, as fathers. And I say, okay, let's put this to the test. I hear what you're saying, but let's just say that when the kids are 15 or 18 and they're moving off to college and, you're looking forward to your grandchildren and, you sort of find yourself not so much in love with your husband anymore because, maybe, an old high school sweetheart has come back, or, you fell in love with the tennis teacher, or whatever it is. You don't want your husband anymore, or maybe he's been a bad guy. Maybe he cheated on you and the relationship is over. Who is going to get shut out of family life? Who's going to get the kids? And who is very much in danger of being, told to hit the road? And who is going to tell the mother if she gets custody of the kids? And it's pretty easy for women to get custody of the kids if they really want it. Accuse him of child abuse, accuse him of domestic violence, accuse him of whatever they want to accuse him of, because the feminist lobby is so powerful that no judge is going to risk even a little iota, or only very brave judges are going to risk even a little iota to say, ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. It's much easier. It's
obvious proof, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, yeah, there's evidence that, he was in Kansas on the night you say he was beating you.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's very easy, if women want to, completely trash the egalitarian basis on which the husband has bought into equalizing his work and his life at home. So if these bad things happen to him, to which he is eminently vulnerable, he's left with his investment in his family completely blown up, and he turns back to look at his career and sees, well, I guess I've proven to the bosses that I'm not managerial material because I didn't prioritize Ajax Acme Corporation. He's screwed both ways. So, women who want men to be the kinds of men they say they want men to be really need to make sure that they are the kind of women they are saying they are. Women who are in the situation where they've got a good career and their marriage ends, they don't want to be told by some ex-husband that, no, he does not want them moving to Indiana to take this professorship that she's been offered. He wants the court to order her to stay here, where he is and where the kids and he have built their lives. But that's not happening. That would be considered patriarchal domination and control of women. No, it would. And it's gotta, we have to be able to talk about this. We have to be able to say, ladies, women of the world, the most sexist idea of all is that only one sex is sexist.
Damn.
And that only one sex is ever harmed by sexism. We got to get over that. And, we learned a lot from feminism, because one of the first things feminism did back in the day, in the 60s, when I was going through puberty, I remember it very well, was that they adopted a very smart tactic, a very helpful tactic, a very constructive tactic, whereby women would sort of confront men and say, they would talk about male chauvinism, which is just sort of the unfounded belief, but very deeply held belief, that men are better than women in a whole bunch of ways. We're better at math, we're better at science, we're logical, women cry too much, we're better leaders, we can make tough decisions. And all of these stereotypes tended to serve the male advantage where we wanted to keep our advantage. These are all the reasons women shouldn't be CEOs. They shouldn't even be middle managers, because I want to be a middle manager. I don't want her competing with me. So I'm going to amplify these stereotypes. It's not really women's fault that they cry too much, but they do. And they're not good at math, and they're not logical. Okay, so we all know that's true, and that happened. But there is also such a thing as female chauvinism. There are many ways in which women believe they are inherently superior to men. And for my money, I would say that the ways in which women believe they are much more, that they are much better than men, much more skilled at men, much more adept at men than men. I would say that the ways in which women think they're better than men are much more important, to me at least, than the ways in which men said they were more important than women. Because if you had a choice between being told you're not good at math, or you're a cold, unfeeling son of a bitch who doesn't care about anybody but himself, and couldn't possibly be a nurturing person to little children, which would you find more insulting?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So the flip side of that is that those are the reasons that women are resisting male equality much more than men resisted female equality. And men resisted female equality a lot.
There's also a lot of obvious ones where, like, women are way better in administrative jobs, like the clear ones, because they're literally filling all of those positions. It's just not a coincidence, like, do you think all companies are just assuming men can't do this job, or are women actually doing it better, is my question.
Well, look, there are differences between men and women, but it's more like this, and I'm holding two fingers parallel to each other with almost 100% overlap. A little bit of a gap at the extremes. There are differences between men and women, but you cannot say that a man is not a good and effective administrative middle manager because he's a man. And you can't say that a woman is always going to be better at it because she's a woman. And that's really what sexism is about. And we have to stop that. To hire a woman because, in your experience, women, because they were mothers, learn certain skills. We should hire women for this job, even though this man looks like he'd be really good too.
What's a better question then in terms of like, what would you say women are obviously like more skilled or adept at than men? Like, or professions, perhaps?
I don't think I would generally say anything.
Really?
Not anywhere near 100%. I mean, there are biological things. Women can gestate, men can impregnate. But that's like, that's just sheer biology.
I'm just asking because I'm making assumptions based on the data, right? Like seeing like positions being filled by a certain gender more than another. So that's why I'm making assumptions about it. So I'm glad you're saying that.
Well, let's talk about the positions you see being filled more by one gender than another.
Like cold calling for a business, for example, it's usually better when women are trying to call in, get new customers, for example. It's just more friendly approach. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of places I've went, it'll be like a girl cold calling.
Yes, and
bringing in new clients in a sense.
Yes, okay. I don't think I would say that's inherently a gender thing, because there are a lot of good men salesmen who, will find out who their prospect is, and if it's a man, they,
here's a good one.
Man,
here's a good one.
What'd you think of this? What'd you think of the Ravens yesterday? If you're in Baltimore, what'd you think of that game? Wasn't that a great game?
I'm trying to think of one that's clearly, and I'm thinking like, okay, how about like a wedding planner, which is usually going to be a woman, something like that.
Well, it might just be sort of men's interest in weddings generally. I mean, and I'm not saying men don't want to get married. I'm saying, probably men would be much happier with, a much simpler, smaller ceremony, because remember, he's not the queen for the day. She's the queen for the day.
True.
Right? So it's a whole different vibe for a man. I mean, he's standing up there in his penguin suit. And before he's engaged, what does he do? He gets down on his knee.
The whole spectacle.
Please marry me.
Yeah.
Please marry. And it's not so much true anymore. But, I remember when you would not say, it was impolite to say to a woman on her engagement, congratulations. You could say it to the man because he accomplished something.
Wow.
He got this woman. She, on the other hand, didn't really accomplish anything by getting this guy.
Wow.
You could say best wishes to her.
Boy, have times changed.
Yeah. And a little bit for the better. A little bit for the better. But we need to continue, because we've pretty much, I think, exhausted the big changes we need to make to ensure women are treated fairly.
I want to read you some stats.
We haven't done nearly as much to make sure men are treated fairly. Go ahead.
So these are a little bit more recent compared to the ones that you were showing me in 2004 on the graphs that I was reading earlier. So particular high rates among suicide African-American men aged 15 to 24. I think it's pretty startling for obvious reasons. Stark overrepresentation, African-American males in incarceration statistics, another deeply troubling aspect. Perhaps one of the most culturally and politically telling aspects is the efforts described in the document, acknowledging and addressing unique challenges faced by men and boys. And one of the things was, in my document that I made personally, I noticed that I should have focused more on gender things, and that I made a couple of broad assumptions that were like saying everybody underage I believe is like entitled to education if you're in the prison system, if I'm not mistaken, and how we should kind of change that to imply more than just, than just under a certain age that you're entitled to it. If you can elaborate more.
Yeah, so now I remember. This is months ago that I sent you this stuff, because I was commenting on some things I thought you overlooked in your paper. You did that for a community college course, right?
Yep.
Okay. What were the data I sent you that were from 2004? I'm surprised
It was like a white paper, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the one you sent? Because there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
It was a PDF. Shoot. I can't find it, but I did. Okay, here's another one. Hold on. This is the one I was really looking for. Okay, so elaborating, going further, a study found that suicidal ideation is reported 21.6% of young African American non-injection drug users, with a significant correlation to multiple drug dependencies. That was in 2005. Now, from 1999 to 2019, there's been an 84.5% increase in the firearm suicide rate among young Black men, indicating a growing crisis that requires urgent attention. That's 2022. Analysis from 2001 to 2017 revealed a 60% increase in suicide rates among African American male adolescents, suggesting that suicides are now a leading cause of death for this group. That's 2019. And this last one, everyday discrimination is linked to higher rates of depressive symptoms and suicide ideation among African American men, indicating the role of systemic issues in mental health challenges. That's also 2019. Any thoughts on these?
Well, I would have really liked it if they had said systemic issues such as race, of course, and gender. But nobody wants to talk about how gender issues affect men. I shouldn't say nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the polite people. You know, the professorial class. You know, there's a lot of pressure in academia to be politically correct.
Do you know how a lot of times there's often a quote that they brush things off with, like politics, where it's like, I'll notice there's some compelling headline, and then the top comment will be like, well, that's why you shouldn't have voted, insert the blank. And that's just an easy way to dismiss people's situation, right? Like, let's just make it a political thing. And do you find that common with the gender issue?
Oh,
like, is there a common way that you feel that's just dismissive of the racial questions that we're trying to get to the root of?
Of the racial questions?
Yeah.
Common way that we, well, I can't think of a way that I've noticed.
You say it's important that we like don't ignore these issues. So I feel like there's probably some way we're pushing this under the rug and keep coming back to a loop.
Well, I do feel this, that Black Lives Matter is female-centered. And they even say that they want to center the problems of women. Now, centering is sort of slippery speak for focus on, pay attention to, talk about, advocate on, demand change on. We're going to center the problems of African American women. Black Lives Matter also talks about undoing the patriarchal nuclear family. As if the patriarchal nuclear family is a huge problem in the Black community.
Do you feel it's a little distasteful, disgraceful what they've done for not standing up for like their main issues?
Well, to them, it is their main issues. Now, look, some of the Black Lives Matter people have been accused of lining their pockets their main issue. Look, I have to be, both politically and just so as not to be an idiot. I have to say, I have never been an African American woman. I have never been an African American man. I can sort of relate to African American men because I get the gender piece.
The man issue, yeah.
Yeah. I can, but I don't have much understanding at all of what it is to be an African American woman who doesn't like men. And I say that because I know there are lots of African American women who love men and care about men, and they are not the squeaky wheels who are getting all of the degrees.
Do you think if we went back in time a little bit that you would have to be so politically correct and watch the things that you say like that? Because I hate that you have to reiterate the things that we should know as common sense, you know? Like, we know you're not trying to offend anybody, but it sucks that you have to go there.
There are lots of people who are doing what I'm doing, which is being on a podcast and, talking about what I think, who just are stupid, and part of being a somewhat thoughtful person is knowing how much you don't know and allowing for the possibility that if you knew what you don't know, you wouldn't think or say what you're now thinking and saying. So, no, I don't feel like I'm really being politically correct there, as much as just to be, a thoughtful person and say, it must be rough to be an impoverished woman with 3 kids and not much support economically. That's almost self-evident. But at the same time, it must be awfully hard to be a man who's got kids that he doesn't get to see because he doesn't get to make any money, because he doesn't make any money, and he's got a prison record. He's got a 9th grade education from a really crummy high school. And in my experience as a parole and probation agent, as a fellow who taught the Inside Out Dad program for incarcerated fathers, there is a lot of love in these men. And to have it completely blocked and stymied and ignored and dismissed and disregarded and manipulated against them because they don't have any money and somebody thinks they should and should give it to them, that's heartbreaking and infuriating. And I think, the men who end up in jail are the ones who are infuriated, and the ones who are heartbroken end up committing suicide.
Do you have
Not
any
100%, of course. Not 100%, of course, but it's the way it tilts.
Do you have any specific racial stories that got you into the actual inequality issues?
Well, I think just growing up in Baltimore, where I saw Black communities up close and personal. My grandfather had a drugstore in downtown Baltimore, in what is now a very, very, very rough part of town. The store, he died in 1965. The store is now, pretty much a collapsed building. It's really, pretty sad. It was once a pretty vital community. Before the Black immigration, it was mostly Irish, German, and I think Polish. But when folks started moving up from the South, looking for jobs in industrial places like Baltimore, there came this thing called white flight, and people got out of Dodge. White people got out of Dodge. So my grandfather had a drugstore in the ghetto, and I got to go down there and quote unquote work over the weekends. Really what we did was we ate everything in the candy counter. And he got a soda fountain with ice cream. So, we didn't really work very hard. But, the customers were Black. They were as nice as they could be. And, when I would tell my buddies, my experiences downtown at my grandfather's drugstore, they were sort of amazed, because they didn't know any Black people. They lived in, a suburban, almost suburban neighborhood in North Baltimore.
Damn.
Yeah. So
so different.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I would say my experience as a parole and probation agent was that it's really a crying shame how we waste the love these men have to give, and we make it contingent upon having money.
Did you have any specific inspirations or mentors that you looked up to, like kind of guided you this direction?
Well, yeah, I would say, I guess I could stretch it and say that Elijah Cummings, a congressman, was sort of a mentor to me. I got to take a couple of minutes for a little story here. Elijah Cummings became a U.S. congressman representing a district in Maryland, a part of Baltimore. Before he was a congressman, he was a state delegate in Annapolis, the state capital. And I had a radio show in 1983 to 1989. And one day I got a flyer, was put in my mailbox from a fella who worked for the Baltimore Urban League, and he was doing a conference on black men and endangered species at an HBCU, Morgan University. And babadoo babading, it's about black men. My show was about men. Had him on to the show, and we really hit it off. And he was quite willing to acknowledge that many of the worst problems black men were facing and that were endangering them as a species were based not so much on race as on the combination of race and gender. It wasn't just because they were black. It's because they were black and male. Boom, you're no good because you're black. Boom, you're no good because you're man. You're a man who's got no money. So I would say, this fellow, his name was Richard, was, a little bit of a mentor to me, but mostly just to sort of confirm what, I sort of knew and intuited to be the case. Because we went down to Annapolis together and tried to get the state to establish a task force on men.
Wow.
To look at what's really going on with men.
Seems kind of bold.
Well, I guess it was. This was in 1985, and then we did it again in 86. The white male legislators derided our proposal as the wimp bill.
Wow.
Yeah.
What problems?
Yeah, exactly. But look, that's what they would say publicly. But privately, in the hallways, several of them said, look, we know what you're talking about and we get it. But we cannot touch this because it will make the women unhappy.
Yikes.
Yikes, yes. And that has been a recurring theme in my career as an advocate for men politically. We get it, but these poor, powerful women would kill us because they're not powerful. These poor, powerless women would kill us. They're not powerless. They have a lot of power, but it serves their purposes not to acknowledge that. Because now you guys have to take care of us and fix it for us. And if you don't, we're gonna vote you out of office.
For a long while, I've kind of predicted that one way to control the American population would be to give all of the money and power to the women and then just kind of cater and pander to their interests and keeping them happy solely. And then a crazier one would be to inject like the first female president, right? Like make it super like we did it. I don't know. That seems like the next little coup, if possible, if they could pull that off and just have like a dominant, which by the way, just to be fair, I'm totally cool with a female president, but I think they would use that to their advantage and play it and I don't know, as a way to empower them and belittle men even more so.
The sisterhood is powerful. It is already much more powerful than the hardly existent brotherhood. Men, if I saw you do something wrong, Joe, I would feel very comfortable. I mean, if we were good buddies,
Mhm.
I would feel very comfortable saying, man, Joe, you went off, man. You shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. But you and I, as men, sort of have this male culture thing called a sense of honor. I don't think the sense of honor is as strong in female culture. Now, what I maybe should say is that the sense of honor is placed in a different direction, because women do have a sense of honor of taking care of their kids.
How it gets done in a different aspect, right?
Yeah.
How they do things.
But between themselves, woman to woman, it's the sisterhood. And I have a study that I could send you if you wanted to see it that showed that, and it was written, the lead investigator.
It's like
on
a
relatable
study. Language in a sense, huh? Only they speak.
Well, yes. This study done by a woman investigator, a woman researcher, found that women demonstrate 4.3 times as much in-group bias as men do. And so,
I thought 1 or 2%. That's crazy.
4.3 times as much in-group bias. And so that would mean that if I'm a woman and you're a woman and you did something really despicable to your husband, to kick him out of the kids' family, the kids' lives, I would not be likely to say, Jesus, you shouldn't have done that. Those kids need their father. What I would be more likely to say is, oh, that must have been so hard for you to do that. And I really support you for doing that. And you said he yelled at you? Oh my God. Poor baby. That's what I would think would take the place of honor between two adults. I think that exhausts what I was going to say on that point. What were you going to say?
I think that pretty much got it.
Okay. All right. On the issue of, there is more to say about honor, I think. And, I think that a lot of honor in male culture arises from sports.
Which is getting more popular. That's kind of cool.
It's getting more popular among women. Yeah. And so, if I had one piece of advice to give to young men, find a woman who plays team sports.
That's a good one.
Sports.
That's
team
a good
sports.
one. I like it.
Not just gymnastics, but team sports.
It's a character already.
Yeah. A second thing I would say would be to recommend that they ask a woman they're interested in, just sort of very casually, so tell me about your father. And if she says, oh, he's a son of a bitch.
Run.
Exactly.
Run.
or at least hold position until you investigate further. It's definitely a red flag.
Yeah.
Definitely a red flag.
In terms of like working with corrections, though, what have you learned the most, like experience-wise? And I believe you have a book, right, that you wrote, Goodwill Toward Men?
Yeah. That wasn't about corrections.
Oh, that's the controversy. It's that I was... Yeah, okay. That one got controversy, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a book that was published in 1994. It was a book of interviews with 22 women, most of whom called themselves feminists, but they were the good kind of feminists that there still were plenty of, back in 93 and 94. The kind who, thought that feminism was about combating sexism.
And a lot of definitions changed in my lifetime, for sure.
Yeah. And this was a book that talked to women not just about the disadvantages women had as women, but the advantages women had as women. And it didn't just talk about the advantages men had as men, but the disadvantages men have as men. And it was a pretty nice book, very constructive, sort of led the way forward for gender equality. I mean, even back in '93, there was still there was already a lot of strife and resentment, going back and forth. But it was a pretty nice book. But immediately after it was published by St. Martin's Press, a big New York publisher, I don't know if they're big, a major New York publisher in New York, immediately after it was published, it got canceled.
That's hilarious.
The female staff basically went on strike against this book. They were not going to promote it. They were not going to fulfill orders for it. They canceled. I was canceled before canceling was a thing.
That's how you know you did something right, though.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think so. When you go on to see how much cancellation has taken over controversial topics these days
for things that aren't even that important, too, right?
And it wasn't. The book was not even that controversial.
How did you feel, though? Like, take me to the time period.
Terrible. I felt terrible, and that's why I wrote that very wry, pithy, sort of. What's the word? Acerbic.
Is that the other one? If men have all the power, how come women make the rules?
Yeah, if men have all the power, how come women make the rules? How come the women at St. Martin's Press got to kill my book when they at the same time complained that all of the executives are men? And it's men who dominate the place.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so
here you are fighting for both sides too, so I'm sure that was really infuriating. Like you were purposely trying not to piss anyone off. Like you were like, I did everything the right way.
Well, I don't go out of my way to piss people off. I don't go out of my way to not piss people off. I just sort of.
So this is an example of when highlighting both sides and being unbiased still goes wrong.
Look, I had an agenda when I was doing my interviews, and there were points that I was interested in asking these women to expound upon. But that's because by '93 already, there was a huge imbalance in media coverage and understanding.
When I was born, you're freaking me out.
You were born in '93?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, my whole life it's been like this, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, which really makes me have a lot of empathy for young people, young men like you, because, one of the justifications that feminism now has for centering the problems of girls is because for 10,000 years, the patriarchy has dominated women and cared only about men, as if the purpose of the patriarchy was not to protect women and children.
Yeah. It turned into this oppressive narrative, even though, of course, they have been, right? It's not like that's the entire purpose of it.
In some ways, yes, women have been restricted.
For sure.
In some ways, yes, men have been restricted. It was called primitive existence, hard life. And nobody got to always do whatever they wanted to do. You had to maximize every bit of advantage that you could maximize.
This is an example of having so much spoiled luxury time, like we're not focused on surviving anymore, so we have these dumb issues that we're creating.
Exactly. I agree. And when you can convince yourself that you're better than those men, or that those men really don't care about emotions or love or relationships or, their heart, all they care about is money and their wallets and their male egos, well, then you can pretty easily justify taking all of the advantages that civilization provides for yourself and letting men do what they quote unquote want to do, or they were naturally born to do, fight and compete and win all the time, which is sort of self-serving way to look at men.
You had quite a few positions, right? Like from the parole to corrections officer, like there's quite a few different things you did. I'm just curious how they
Too
all
many,
were.
too many, too many, too many,
Did you
too
have a
many.
favorite? Was there one that was the worst? Give me some good stories.
Well, the most fun job I ever had was for 3 summers in the resort town of Ocean City, Maryland, on the Atlantic coast. I was a fully authorized city cop for 3 summers.
What? That's cool.
Yeah, it was very fun. It was very fun. It was very fun. But it was crazy. It was crazy.
You weren't scared? No fear?
No, there were some times I was afraid, had some fear. You know, you can't show it,
Yeah.
or you try not to show it. And once you get to a point where you have to say to somebody, "I need you to do this," you have to do this. They have to do it, or you have to make them do it, or you have to get the shit beat out of you, losing in the effort to get them to do it. You can't just walk away and say, "Oh, okay, if you don't want to," which is why, smart police officers know that
they just tase you. They just get to the point and just tase you.
Well, those are not the smart ones.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, but what I learned was that laws are tools, and if something isn't broke, you don't need to fix it, and you don't need to pull this tool out of your toolbox and tighten somebody up. That's probably the main thing I learned. That was one of the funnest jobs I ever had.
What about like parole or probation agent? Those seem like crazy jobs.
Those are crazy jobs because the caseload is unmanageable. You just cannot do what you want to do.
Wow.
You got a guy who's crying in your office, for instance. I was a nice cop. I was a nice, to the extent that you can be a nice jail guard.
Mm-hmm.
I was considerate and tried to ease
get them things they need. Yeah.
Try to make sure they got what they need. I was a very nice parole and probation agent, and there is no doubt that some of my guys, and they were almost all guys, some of my parolees and probationers played me because they knew that I cared about them and felt empathy for their situation, but not all of them, and probably not even anywhere close to half. And some of these guys had done some bad things, and I had some of these big tough guys in my office talking to me about what was going on with them, and some of them would cry because they could not catch a break. They got nothing going for them. Maybe they have a diploma from a crummy high school, but it's possible in Baltimore to have a diploma from a high school and barely be able to read. You got a prison record. You got no skills. You got kids whom you love, but you don't get to see them. And you're trying to find a job, but you can't. The economy in Baltimore is pretty rough. For people with no skills and arrest records.
No money to just leave either,
Yeah. And, you want to try to help, but you can't because you get like 4 minutes with each guy once a month. And it's, so that's why I left and went to National Fatherhood Initiative where, you had a little more time to work on the bigger issues, on big problems.
Sounds emotionally draining, especially if you're an empath.
Yeah. But even more than being emotionally draining, it was just sort of like frustrating that
you're limited.
You see some things that could really help, but there's no chance they're going to get done. I mean, for instance, if you're on parole and probation in Baltimore City, and you are in a relationship with a woman like this, she can have you thrown back in jail. Because all she's got to do is call Mr. Kammer at the parole and probation office and say, Sam hit me. He just beat me up. And so I didn't believe it, because I didn't believe it. The story didn't make sense. And I think it was really two women who got together to sort of make up a story that they didn't sink it very well. So anyhow, I didn't believe the story. This fellow was doing really well, trying to do well at least. I went to my boss and I said, this woman is saying he hit her. I don't think it's true. What should I do? And the boss said, in the interest of public safety.
Oh, no. AKA, we need to make some money. We got budgets to fill.
No, it wasn't for money.
No, it
wasn't for money. No, it was like the judge. It was like the judge who can't say anything other than, yes, dear, we believe you. What I had to do was to write him up, charge him with violating the terms of his probation, send that to the judge. The judge says, okay, I set these conditions for his probation. He violated the terms of the probation. I'm issuing an arrest warrant. So he issues the warrant, goes to the warrant team. They execute the warrant. They grab him up, send him back to jail. Like,
you're giving me flashbacks, because I literally had a friend in my apartment complex whose girlfriend used this against him. Like, she would just literally make him comply with everything. And if you don't listen, I can just call this person and you're gone. And that's literally what it escalated to. It's just something they hold over you. What is that even called, by the way? Is there a term for this?
I call it perjury.
Wow. Never heard that term.
Well, I made it up. Perjury.
All right. I was about to Google it.
Yeah.
Perjury. I get it.
What's it called? It's called oppression.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not called oppression in this context, but the flavor of it is the unbridled exercise of power to perpetrate an injustice.
Wow.
It's oppression. And it happens all the time. Wow. And there are court watchers. There are organizations of women. Now, these are organizations of women who might really have been hurt and might really have been real victims of domestic violence. And so they are as passionate about that as I am passionate about what I'm passionate about. But these are organizations of women who will sit in courts when domestic violence cases are being heard. And they're sitting right there in the pews, and the judge knows they're there. And so what incentive does the judge have to say?
It never ends well. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he goes,
damn.
She gets what he wants. She gets the protective order. This is a different case here, a different type of case we're calling here.
Woman might not even have asked for that person to show up, huh?
He might not have shown up because the summons is sent to his last known address, and there's so much chaos in these men's lives that, they're basically homeless and hopping from place to place. They might not even be there. So there's a protective order that throws him out of the house and tells him to stay away from the woman. But of course, the woman is also where the kids are, so he's got to stay away from the kids. And it happens all the time, and we cannot talk about it because we have to center the problems of women.
God, this is huge. That's really huge. We're bringing to light right now. I hate that it keeps coming back to the same thing, by the way, but it seems like that is the
What
central
is
issue.
the same thing you see it coming back to? What's the common element you see?
It sounds super selfish, but we're just putting women's needs above everything. But I think it's a political thing, to be honest. Like, I think that whether it's the government or corporations, they're going to incentivize this to be a blindly led thing. Like, they're just going to keep giving money, keep giving incentive, and it's not going to be a problem, in my opinion. Like, the issues of inequality, if we thought the wealth gap was extreme, wait till we see women and men start to peel away from each other. Then, I mean, we're still not going to say anything because women are going to be happy, right?
And they're going to vote as a block with their 4.3 times much in-group bias.
And it's super easy to say that we don't know what we're talking about just because we're guys talking about women issues as well.
Well, it never stopped them from talking about men's issues, except they didn't call them men's issues. They called it oppression.
Yeah, get them, Jack.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What are you currently working on? What are future projects you're most excited about?
Well, I don't want to jinx the one I'm working on. So
Good
I got
idea.
some wood here.
I
got some wood here, and I could knock on wood, but I don't want to jinx it.
I'm the same way.
Plus, it's not ready to be. It's not ready to be launched. Now, what I am doing that I can talk about is that I'm blogging occasionally on Medium. Do you know the platform Medium?
Yeah. The articles.
Do you know? Yeah, and you know Substack.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'm on there occasionally. Really, all I'm doing now is serializing Goodwill Toward Men, the book of interviews with women. And I am serializing If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? Because I have found that it really isn't very much worth my while to, spend 3 or 4 hours writing an article that gets 8 views. There is an algorithm, and I have it from a person who knows Medium really well, who says, no, there's the algorithm is biased against what I'm talking about. So let's just say my articles are not being centered on Medium.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the story behind the most challenging interview that you've conducted?
Most challenging? Oh, God. There was this woman in Texas, I think she was, who just did not want to hear anything I was saying. And podcasting is a very cool medium because it is like the opposite of corporate. I mean, you can finance this show out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do it primarily, I think, if you're like most podcasters that I've been a guest of, you do it because you have this burning curiosity.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
You want to hear new things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're so damn smart and everybody knows the answers, why are things so fucked up?
It's also good to get reconfirmation, right, on things you're working on from different people in the same field.
Yeah. It means a lot to me that, you can say, wow, yeah, this is terrible. So the worst interview was by this woman. I think she was in Texas, and she just didn't want to hear anything I was saying. And I told her a story about something that I didn't really learn, but confirmed when I was a 7th grade teacher. I was a 7th grade teacher for 1 year as a volunteer.
I love it. I love these random stints, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes
I had to try it.
Well, yeah, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of romantic, but I didn't really have a career to speak of. I never really got really, really good at any one thing.
I relate.
But when I was a 7th grade teacher, I had never taken a course in education, how to be a teacher. I was a volunteer. And I was only going to be there for a year. It was a 1-year stint. And I wanted to it wasn't that long after I was a seventh grade teacher. I was teaching seventh and eighth grades. And it was like 10 years after I was a seventh grader. And so I wanted to, get to be, close with my kids. But at the same time, I also wanted to maintain some decorum, some sense of discipline, some sense of systematization, keeping things calm and productive. And I remembered what it was like when I was in the seventh grade. And so I asked one of the veteran teachers there, what advice do you have for how to establish, a decorum in the classroom? And her response was, don't smile before Thanksgiving. That was her advice. Be a hard ass.
Wow.
Be a hard ass. Well, she was great, but there was a lot of truth to it. You gotta be hard for the first part. Well, I was only going to be there for a year, so I didn't want to wait until November, to try to
be nice,
be able to relate to my kids. So I thought back to what really was important to me when I was a seventh grader. And I remembered that one day we were outside on a really nice, I guess it was a spring day. We were outside, my seventh grade class, we were outside for art class. And I got in trouble because I was mimicking the sound of a bird. And I think it was a Bob White, because I was going. I was a better whistler back then.
I was like, what is that?
So I got in trouble for that. But at the same time, girls were all, whispering and laughing and giggling, except they were doing it quieter. And they were doing it for like 20 minutes. And I thought, that ain't right. And so when I became a seventh grade teacher, the first day of school, I drew on the blackboard 2 graphs, 2 XY axes. And on the x-axis, I labeled it time. Both graphs, both x-axes were labeled time. So, all the way to the left is a little bit of time, and all the way to the right is a lot of time. And then on the vertical axis, I wrote the word badness. And I put badness in quotes, because when seventh graders are bad, they're not really bad. But, in the context, it's bad. So on the vertical axis, I put badness. And I then I labeled one of them boys and one of them girls. And I said to the class, this is how boys are typically bad. And I drew a line that didn't go very far to the right, but went way high on the badness scale. Very bad for just a bazillionth of a second. Okay?
Yeah.
And then I shaded the area under that graph.
I know where it's going.
Go ahead, tell the rest of the story.
So I guess girls don't get in trouble and they can talk as long as they want, basically. There's a tolerance threshold for women, I guess. I don't know.
So what did the graph on the girls? What did the line on the girls' graph look like?
That we'll put up with it for a super long amount of time.
Oh, no, but to describe what the line looks like.
That there's no badness, and we'll like just listen forever, I guess, to women talk. Is that what it is?
So it does it go up very high on the badness scale?
No, it stays low on the vertical. It just goes far on the time.
Exactly. And I shaded in the area under. And I said, you can see that the shaded area of badness seconds
Yeah.
It's about the same. And I said, so. I said,
you're getting your ultimate revenge.
well, this is before I even knew had any conscious thought about male gender issues.
Okay,
Although
that's fair.
I must have had something going on subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to the class, if I punish a boy for doing this, of course that's going to happen. Of course I'm going to punish a boy for doing this.
Yeah.
But I said, but I want to say to the girls in the class, if I should punish you for this, don't say, "Gal, Mr. Kammer, I was only whispering." Don't think about how bad it was. Think about how long it was bad.
Wow.
And guess what? What do you think the girls said?
I don't know, actually. I can't predict that
They said, wow. Yeah.
So just had a realization, basically.
Well, they said, yeah, that's exactly right. They said So the toughest interview I ever did on a podcast was when I was telling this woman I was going to make a point.
She kept cutting you off. I'm guessing she didn't.
She just said, no, oh my God, she canceled me. She said, I'm going to stop this interview right here because you said that girls do this and boys do that. That's so damaging. And I said, I didn't say that's all they do.
Yeah.
No, that was, I saved that. I still have a recording of that.
That's actually one of my least favorite things that people do, by the way, is like focus on the one detail of something they don't agree with.
Well, yeah, she's a true believer. And she was a true believer in the whole issue of gender identity. That's why she went off on me. So, yep, that's a good one. Most difficult.
That's interview. A good one. Yeah. Any memorable encounter that significantly impacted your advocacy work?
Well, yeah, my father.
Care to elaborate?
Yeah. And he and I never talked about what I was doing. He died in 1984. I started my radio show, my activities, in 1983.
We can talk about that after.
Huh?
I'm curious about the radio show, so we can talk about that after.
Okay. And it was my encounters with him. My father was an old-time family doctor. He had 7 kids.
Wow.
And old-time family doctors did not wake in the dough. And I can't say that I knew until much later everything he did for us. But I can say that he became an alcoholic.
Same.
And what'd you say?
Same. My dad too.
Your dad too?
Yeah.
Well, have you ever talked to your audience about that?
No, I haven't.
I bet you it would be a good show because they know you. Your audience knows you, and they would find a lot of relevance probably. My father was the bad guy in the family. My mother was great. And I think that if it weren't for my mother, I wouldn't be out here talking about what I believe. On the other hand, because she was always encouraging me, that I was a good kid and I was an eager beaver and, all this good stuff. She made me feel good about myself. My father, on the other hand, maybe not even on the other hand, but maybe just sort of at a 90-degree angle, was pretty much saying the same thing. If you believe something, stand up for it. Don't let people push you away. But in my family, my mother was the angel and my father was the bad guy. And I always just sort of had this thought that well, she was great, but she wasn't an angel. She was a human being. And, we don't know what went on behind closed doors. And he never spoke because, men didn't talk about these things, which reminds me of an insight I had as a kid. Whenever my parents' friends got together, and this was back in the day when they would have cocktail parties. And, they'd get together at somebody's house and 3 or 4 couples would have a cocktail party. And when they were having the cocktail party at our house, I would get to hang out and listen to the people talking. And I remember as a little boy feeling bad that every time there was a divorce being talked about in that community of friends, mostly all doctors, whenever there was talk of a divorce, I always felt bad that it was always the man's fault. And I thought, wow.
Even though the women initiate them, right?
Well, that's part of it. But what the realization to me was later on, sort of a realization from self-preservation of my psyche was, well, Jack, the reason you got the impression that it was always the man's fault was because it was only the women who were talking about it. The men weren't talking about.
Yeah, that's a super personal, deep thing, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
It's a good point.
It's the honor thing. Men are not going to pry into.
Yeah.
Because they might have to say, well, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, no, you just made me think how prominent that mindset of just get over it, or we can't dwell on anything, because it affects everything, though. It affects your daily life, the way you function, even if you really are messed up by it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep. So I remember very early on, just probably about the same time as hearing that I was good with babies for a boy, I remember thinking that the saddest thing I could imagine for my future was that I was going to grow up and I was going to be like all of the men of all of the friends in the neighborhood. And I was going to get up and I was going to leave the house every morning and go away for 9 or 10 hours doing who knows what. And I was going to be leaving my kids and then come back and be tired and grumpy. And I thought, that is not what I want for my life. And so, when I realized that was basically my father's life, except worse, because he was an old-time family doctor who had 7 kids to put through college, and he was working his ass off day and night and still making house calls.
You saw that far into the future?
Well, as I grew older, I saw all of the stuff he was doing. It just became clearer and clearer what he was having to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we never said, thanks, Dad. Never.
Oh, wow.
It was. But I did get to give his eulogy. And, because nobody else wanted to do it. I figured I could probably figure out something to say that would honor the man for who he was, rather than saying, oh, my father was such a warm, kind, caring, loving.
Yeah.
We could, he would play baseball with us. I wasn't going to lie about it. I had to figure out a way to honor him for who he was. And the theme of my eulogy was, he really wasn't the kind of father I would have liked to have had, because he was working so hard all the time. And who he was a doctor. He was a doctor. That's what made him who he was. And so, way at the end of this story, at the funeral, my father's funeral, this is like the day before I do the eulogy because it's the wake, but he had tons of his patients coming to the wake, to the funeral home, to pay their last respects. And my brothers and sisters and I were all there, and these folks would tell us about how warm and kind and caring and gentle and patient and sweet and loving and kind Dr. Kammer was. And my brothers and sisters and I looked at each other and we said, this guy. Oh, yes, he was so kind and caring and loving. You know, that is it for me. He had no relationship with his kids. A very weak and tenuous relationship with his kids. I think his relationship with his older kids, I was number 5 out of 7.
But he cared about
better.
people, right?
Yes. My older brothers remember him before he became an alcoholic. So, and I do too, but I was much younger when he was not an alcoholic. So he was an alcoholic, during my formative years. It was pretty bad. But, it just became clear that that the last year of his life, I was doing this radio show, and I just saw him as sort of the quintessential man that I would like men not to have to be. Now, he had it worse than most guys because, most men would go to 9 to 5. He was working, late into the night and doing house calls and all that stuff. But I'll tell you the biggest regret of my life. This is the biggest regret of my life, and I am not proud of this at all. But the day before he died, he called me and he said, "Jack, would you come on over here? I want to talk with you." This is really sad. He didn't sound sick. He had been sick for a long time. His first heart attack was when he was 35, and he died when he was 70. But he didn't sound sick, so I said, "Dad, I'm kind of busy here." I was probably doing some stupid thing. I was kind of, I said, I can't come out there today.
Damn.
And he just sort of said, "Oh, okay. And the next day I got a call that he was dead.
Damn. Never know.
Never know. Never, ever, 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 ever know.
That's real. Do you feel like, because I felt like I struggled with my dad being able to relate to me, so do you have that same sentiment?
It's hard to know what things were like for him as a boy.
That's a good point.
Yeah. My grandfather, whom we all loved, but then again, grandfathers have a pretty good gig compared to being a father.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We all loved our grandfather, but it would not surprise me at all if he, a German, a second generation German immigrant, I think maybe it was his grandfather who came over, but anyhow, he's Russian, German, just don't exactly show their emotions. I wouldn't be surprised if my father had it pretty rough and just sort of got the message that this is, the way men are supposed to be. Becoming a doctor is not a cakewalk, so he had to, really work hard to get to medical school.
Especially back then.
Yeah. I know there was there were no iPads to help. Slinging his books back and forth. He was a good man, and it breaks my heart that I see him as a tragic figure, and I think my siblings, for the most part, see him as a sort of a villain, and I see him more as a tragic figure.
Damn.
Just, he was a good man who was not a happy man, and I just sort of knew. I think the question you asked me like 5 years ago was a big influence on my life. So my father was a big influence on my life, but not in a positive way, sort of in a cautionary way.
Damn. That's also good though. I feel like that's a good legacy to leave behind still. Like don't fall into my pattern or my routine. Like and even if he didn't make it, explicitly known that he knew what he was doing, at least you had the wherewithal to notice some patterns, right? It's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that, by the way. That's a deep story.
Yeah.
What's the most unexpected support or endorsement you've ever received?
I think it's probably from some women. Because there are a lot of women who get it. A lot of women who signed up for feminism because...
And now they're realizing.
Well, no, they signed up for feminism because they saw sexism going both ways.
Mm-hmm.
They might have had a brother who had it rough somehow, or a father, or an uncle, or or they might have noticed how easy it would have been for them to screw their ex-husbands if they wanted to. I don't know. But when a woman says, "Yeah, it's terrible what's happening to men and boys," who are really, really, really the strongest advocates, the strongest and the most credible, although they have a lot of trouble, like all of us do, who want to talk about male gender issues, have a lot of trouble getting any traction. But mothers of boys, and there are various mobs, MOBs. There are various mobs around the country. Apparently, there's a pretty big mob group on Facebook. But the mothers who see what's happening with their sons and how they get treated in school and how many programs there are for girls and, how their boys are just sort of lost. Mothers of boys are probably the greatest inspiration. Because
it's my inspiration.
Yeah. Are you talking about your mother?
Yeah, for sure.
Be fun. I would urge you, please, do a show, even if it's just you talking about your father and about your mother, and then maybe a third one about their relationship. I bet your audience would love it.
Damn.
Because you're talking
super vulnerable. I just can't imagine it, but I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
understand.
How do economic downturns specifically impact men, and why is this issue often overlooked? A little relevant right now, I'm sure, that question.
Well, let's see. So the question is, economic downturns often impact men?
Yeah, how is it overlooked?
Well, first of all, I'm not much of an economist. And I would say that to the extent that economic downturns affect men, or to the extent that any economic hardship affects men, it's really not the lack of money that is primary. It's what they'll talk about, and it's what they'll feel bad about consciously. But there's the shame aspect. Because, even when a woman is making more money than her husband, if there becomes a sudden need for money, let's say one of the kids needs a hugely expensive surgery that the insurance is not going to pay for, and the couple cannot afford it, in my view, you tell me what your view would be, which member of the couple is going to feel the most sense of shame and failure that he or she does not have the money?
I've actually been through this. I've been through this situation where I dated a girl who had a really good job, and I was working 3 jobs, including a government job, and I still could not make the money that she was making. And let's just say that relationship didn't work out. But yeah, it came a point where I'm like trying to make more, and I still couldn't make more, and she's doing a lot less, and I'm really struggling just to try to compete. Like, you know, like she didn't have the struggle aspect of having to go to different jobs. She just had one job. So they don't even include all that running around, and, you know, it's a lot to juggle is what I'm trying to get at.
The stress looking for a job.
Yeah. To maintain that many. To maintain 3 jobs at once too, to try to compete. Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did she treat you?
Oh, I mean, there's nothing bad in that aspect. So you can have the best partner in the world is what I'm trying to get at, but still you don't feel fulfilled. You'll never feel like you're enough because of this.
Yes.
Nothing to do with the other person.
And that really fits in really well with the theme of your show.
Yeah. Damn.
More than rich. You know, if a woman wants to take time to smell the roses, it's very different from if a man wants to take time to smell the roses. Wow. I mean, there are about half medical schools these days are women. And one of the things that is spoken about by the older male faculty is that this might not be a good thing to have half of the medical school slots taken by women. And the reason is because female doctors tend to work fewer hours, see fewer patients than male doctors do. It's not because they're not as good of doctors. It's not because they're not as smart.
Just a preference.
It's because it's preference. They're not under the gun to make money. They are not judged by how rich they are monetarily. They don't judge their happiness by how rich they are monetarily, much less so for men. And so a male doctor is not going to, work Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday in his nice little practice where he has lots of time off and does what other things he wants to do. He's going to be maximizing his income much more so. I think it's true, although, you can't say this and you'll get into a big argument if you try to make the point that, women, it's work-life balance, which is a phrase that never existed until women got very heavily into careers. And I think they got to it and they said, whoa, this is really, and this male domination and easy life and this male privilege stuff is really not such a great privilege. And so work-life balance became something that they realized they wanted, and it's still primarily thought of in terms of women, not men.
That's fair. What kind of misconceptions about fatherhood do you think need more clarification?
That fathers and mothers, generally speaking, don't tell the woman in Texas I said this, but generally speaking, it's because of a lot of factors. Mothers and fathers parent differently. And the misconception that I would like to have reconceived is that, therefore, it is self-evident that men's parenting is inferior, because we all know that women know how to do it best. And you've heard it said, of course, that the world would be so much better if women ran the world. There wouldn't be any more wars, and we'd have 1,000 years of peace. And I say,
I think it'd be a little more spiteful.
Well, yeah. Well, look, men can be spiteful too.
I think they get each other back, though. Women really hold these grudges.
We have some blood grudges. But I say, look, I'm good for that experiment. You want to have it set up so that women run all international affairs? I'm willing to go for that, if at the same time what men get is dominion. We get the realm, we get primary say over the raising of the children.
That'd be interesting.
I think the world would be a much better place.
I could imagine. That'd be a great social experiment. I'm sure they have data on that. They're just not telling us.
Well, look, there is plenty of data that shows that kids raised with fathers do better than kids raised with single fathers generally do better than kids raised with single mothers.
Interesting.
That's, I think, pretty well established. And, just to give a nod to women, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is that when a father has sole custody, he is much more likely to make sure that the kid has a good relationship with his mother than a single custody mother is to make sure that the kid has a good relationship with the father.
That's true. I can vouch for that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm proof to that statement. Wow. Yeah. You don't realize how many of these are commonalities. A lot of people probably think their situation's pretty unique to them. And then that makes you feel even more alone in the world. And here I am half my life later realizing how common this really is for people going through this, especially kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how hard is it to talk about this? Very hard. It's called parental alienation.
Damn.
But the maternalists, the bad kind of feminists, are waging an active campaign in state legislatures around the country. I know they did it in Maryland. I testified against what they were trying to do in Maryland, in Annapolis. They were trying to create a law that would dictate to the judiciary, to judges, that they could not listen to any discussion about parental alienation, that parental alienation never happened. It never happens. Women never do this. And the only reason men say that women do it is because the men are beating the women and are trying to deflect attention from the fact that the men are beating the women. And it's because the men are beating the women that the women are saying bad things about the husband, and the children are saying bad things about the husband and don't want to be with him anymore. And so the judges may not entertain any allegation that the mother is damaging the children and committing a very bad form of child abuse by poisoning their relationship with their father.
Wow. Circular.
It's terrible. And it would be really good if the people who have credibility on these issues, namely women, the good women, said, wow, we got to stop this. But here's what I think is going on. In the bad old South, the racially segregated South, you didn't have to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan to benefit in certain ways from what the Ku Klux Klan was doing. The Ku Klux Klan was keeping blacks from applying for certain jobs, trying to get into certain schools, doing certain things that would, be an expression of their desire for equality, and that would bring blacks and whites into closer contact. You didn't have to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan to sort of think in the back of your mind, I guess I'm glad that my kids can go to an all-white school. And today, you don't have to be a rabid feminist to benefit in certain ways from what rabid feminism is doing. Because maybe you kind of like it. That if your husband ever cheats on you, or if you fall in love with the tennis instructor and you want to leave your husband because you don't love him anymore or he doesn't love you anymore, you might kind of like to know in the back of your head, well, I can get rid of him and my relationship with my kids. I can protect that perfectly by just saying the kids are afraid of him.
Damn.
The surest cure to that, if you really want to get men invested in their kids, is to protect their investment. You don't put money into a bank that's not insured by the FDIC, right? But we are asking men.
Is the FDIC a trustworthy woman in this situation?
Well, it's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right?
Yeah.
What would be the FDIC for men to make sure that their investment in their kids was protected would be the establishment across the country in every state, where it's only in effect in about 3 states now, a rebuttable presumption for joint custody. Now, you know the term rebuttable presumption?
I don't. You can break that down for me.
Okay. So you do know what a rebuttable presumption is.
It sounds like argue that I can take the kids and that it doesn't exist in other states. That's what it sounds like. Like you can make an argument for why the person isn't fit.
It's sort of the other way around. Yeah, it's like that, but it's the other way around. Because you grew up in America, you know what a rebuttable presumption is. The rebuttable presumption that you know is you're innocent in a criminal court of the charges against you until you're proven innocent. You don't have to prove yourself innocent. They have to prove that you're guilty. If the state wants to lock you up, they have some work to do. They don't just get to grab you and throw you in jail and make you work to get out. There is a presumption that you are innocent. Now, it's rebuttable. The state can rebut the presumption, can argue against the presumption by presenting its evidence. So you are presumed innocent, but after they present their case, they have successfully rebutted that, you're guilty, you go to jail. But it's a rebuttable presumption of innocence until proven guilty. That's where we start. A rebuttable presumption for joint custody would say that both parents are regarded as good parents and needed parents and loving parents and essential parents and parents that the kids want contact with. That's the rebuttable presumption. You start with that. And before any judge or any legislature can say, you, Joe, are not good for your kids, get the hell out of here and leave them alone.
They need to prove it.
But send a check every month and don't complain about it.
Which is how it is now, mostly.
A rebuttable presumption would make sure that both of you maintain your status as parents. The benefit of that is huge and multifactorial. For one thing, the kids don't lose either parent. And neither parent, in the dynamic between the parents, neither parent needs to feel like they are in a death struggle. Because neither parent has to feel like one of us is going to get killed here because one of us is going to walk away with sole custody.
One
and
person
the other
gets demonized, for sure. Absolutely.
Or even if not demonized, even if the parent is a loving parent, the other parent is a loving parent, you become a zoo daddy.
Yeah, someone loses, right? And that's the
You
real
lose a
issue.
lot. You lose a lot when you become, a visitor to your children. A rebuttable presumption for joint custody would do wonders for women who want men to be fully supportive of their careers and their desire for work-life balance. Because I would never tell a man, go all in on the 50-50 parenting thing. Because if something happens, you don't walk out 50-50. You walk out pretty much 50-0.
Damn.
50-0.
So 100, nothing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
A few more questions here. I definitely want to get into the radio one, but I think I'll leave the radio question for last because that's the long time you did that. Which one is it? Can you share any insight about your work that often surprises people?
Yeah, it still surprises people that, a person who seems like an otherwise reasonable person doesn't completely agree with everything feminism says. It still surprises a lot of people.
That's interesting. Is there a myth about men's rights that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah. That we're all troglodytes.
What is a troglodyte?
I think it's sort of like a Neanderthal.
Oh, okay. I got you.
I think.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure it's human, but it's, real primitive.
Subhuman. Got it.
Yeah. Here's the main misconception. The main misconception about men's activists and MRAs is the nasty phrase that is thrown at us, as if a men's rights activist is ipso facto wrong just by virtue of wanting men to have rights and have them protected. Is horrible.
Sounds funny.
But the nasty feminist dismissal of everything the men's movement is trying to do is that we are just upset about the loss of our male privilege. And so at this point, I think of my father and his male privilege. And I know a lot of men who think about their fathers and their own jobs and their own struggles to capture all of the many wonders and glories of male privilege, of working their asses off to make money at jobs they hate. So it's to protect our male privilege that we are trying to keep women down and to roll back women's advances. Well, that, has a certain amount of resonance, partly because of the negative stereotypes that are still largely at work about men. Because, the stereotypes about men are that we have no feelings, no love, no desire for intimate relationships, no caring for others. We're all just egotistical. And if we ever think of anybody else, it's to have sex with. Just that kind of stupid stuff. So the truth of the matter is that most of the men that I know who are in the men's movement are in the men's movement because they supported the women's movement up until the women's movement hit the brakes.
Interesting.
And said, this is enough. This is enough equality right here.
Let's go back to the other side.
Well, let's hold it right here. Now, but if we want to go back, we can do that.
Oh my gosh.
Just for fun.
Yeah, we're doing the Roe v. Wade thing.
Well, that's a
touchy one.
Well, I mean, I do think that there is such a thing as a need for respecting reproductive rights for men.
Yeah, I actually think this is why they're doing it, is for population. Like, they need more babies in America, and we're not producing kids. So I kind of think that was the purpose of it, even though it's not an efficient one.
That is a pretty cynical view.
Yeah,
maybe it's true.
I agree.
Maybe it's true. I don't know. But most of the men I know started out feminist because Betty Friedan was talking about the fact that things weren't exactly a bowl of cherries for men either. I mean, really, Betty Friedan, you know who she was?
No.
Feminine Mystique. She wrote The Feminine Mystique. She is largely credited with launching, sparking the modern women's movement. Her book was in 1963, The Feminine Mystique. She was a co-founder and the first president of the National Organization for Women.
Wow.
Yeah. She was not anti-male. So feminism was not anti-male, and a lot of men supported it because they were up to their eyeballs with, their supposed male privilege. And they were willing to trade. I'll take a little bit of what you got. You can have a little bit of what I got. We're all better off. Men, I think that the male gender issues movement is the most progressive movement afoot in America today. Because we want to move forward to where both sexes are unbound by sexist limitations, and we're both free to have what we need in balanced measure so that we are both stronger to work with each other, to be better partners for each other, so that women can support us in being really involved as parents, and we can support women in being really involved in their careers.
I have to bring this up to you. Are you familiar with the trend of the soft guy era that's going on right now?
I just read that on, I think it was on Medium today.
So it's like a super sarcastic take, and they're just basically using the women's argument against them. It's hilarious, though, because basically they're implying spend your money on us, like if you want to be with us. And it's thinking about everything you're saying, though. It's like, how bad did it get that we were just like, okay, let's turn this argument around to literally mimic what you're doing?
Well, yeah, I see it as satire.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's performance satire. But yeah, it's men sort of saying, well, you want equality.
Because you said it's the biggest issue, the biggest problem, and that's ironic because that's literally the biggest trend for like dating in terms of the conversation that's going on right now. That's the conversation. Yeah.
Really. So what ages of men are performing the soft men?
I would say up to 40. Like, because even like teenagers are even catching on to this, where it's like, stop giving them so much attention and stuff.
Okay, well, of course this terrifies women. What are they saying?
They are not having it. And that's why I was getting at, when I brought up earlier the whole passport bro aspect, I was like, even if they knew that their mating options are going to leave the country and go find someone, whatever, traditional, do you think that that's going to make them change how they feel when they've already been spoiled and accustomed to getting things bought for them, never spending money on certain things? Like, I don't think they would change. It's just, you've already gotten people too used to a certain way of living. They're just going to assume they'll find someone else that'll do the things that guys aren't doing.
You're saying women won't change.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And so that raises another very important point. Who are the chief opponents of the men's movement? Other men.
Oh.
Other men. Other men. Because they can be the knight in shining armor and give women what women think they want at the age of, 21, 22, and 23. They're thinking about, I had the knight in shining armor. He's an alpha male. He's a winner. And, he makes a lot of money.
Buy me things I need.
Yeah, he buys me things I need. And I suppose there are some saints among men, but, I have seen resentment pop up after a few years of that. And if not resentment, just the dark side of the traditional male role. Well, if I make the money, I get to be the boss, and so shut up and do what I say.
Yeah,
and that's not a formula for a happy relationship. Maybe for a few years, but when the avocados start getting overripe, and you're not the sexy babe you used to be anymore, you might be in for some trouble.
That's a good point. How do you feel like the actual music industry has played a role into all of this?
I know you're a musician.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
Because the prison industrial complex has invested interest with music labels and stuff. So I asked that question to say, do you feel like the music perpetuates the cycle of putting black men back into jail?
So are you saying that the corporations that run prisons
they're incentives? Incentivized to keep those prisons full.
So are they partly owned by
music labels,
record companies, or do they partly own record companies?
Yeah.
Wow. See, now I have heard that private prisons are a terrible idea. And I would agree they are, but I would clarify that by saying prisons are a horrible idea. The jail, I didn't work in a prison. I worked in a jail, pre-trial detention. The jail that I worked in was run by the state of Maryland. And the reason it was run by the state of Maryland was because the city of Baltimore completely lost control of it. And it wasn't because they didn't lose control. They didn't do a bad job because it was run by a private company. They did a bad job because of other things that can be wrong with governmental agencies. I mean, the tiny bit of experience I have with private profit-making prisons is that they did as good a job as the government-run prisons that I have a little bit of experience with. I mean, look, you still got the unions that you got to contend with. You still got the prisoners you got to contend with. You still got gangs in prison you got to contend with. The profit motive, if to be able to look at a state-run jail or a state-run prison and just sort of study how it operates, and to be able to, get together with other people who are good with management and criminology and corrections and come up with a different way of running a prison that maybe the state correctional officers don't want because it would affect them in some way. I don't know that that's a bad thing.
I had thought about recently thinking, imagine if we did start educating really heavily into jails and prisons. And then I was thinking, imagine that turned it into some kind of networking thing where people were taking pride to go make connections in jail at that point because they knew they could get an education. And then I said to myself, that's still not the worst thing ever. That's actually still better that people learn these communicative skills, even if they do have to go to jail. It's horrible to think that might be an outlet for somebody, that they might not have anything else at least I can go get an education in jail, but we don't even have that to offer. So I say that though, because my question was, how do educational systems fail boys, and what reforms would you suggest?
Well, we definitely need more male teachers in schools. And we need to encourage male teachers to the extent that they feel like they want to, they teach different. which is a phrase that I heard from a stay-at-home father whom I met at a city dad's gathering. I asked him how he likes being a stay-at-home father. For the most part, stay-at-home fathers love being a stay-at-home father. They'll say it's a lot of work, but then you remind them that work is a lot of work, and they're like, yeah, it's a pretty good gig. Here's what I tell my wife, they say, or this one fella said, but it sort of seems to be a thread running through all the experiences of stay-at-home fathers. This one fella said, I tell my wife, I parent different. I do it my way. And I think that if male teachers were empowered to teach their way, they wouldn't have boys and girls sitting behind a desk and have the girls writing their notes.
They do make it fun. Now that you're saying it, they do make it more fun and engaging, I feel.
The male teachers?
Yeah. They're more memorable.
I had some really good female teachers, but I would just say that we need more male teachers.
They're a little better storytellers for guys. Like, you can relate to them in that aspect.
Yeah, I would say there's probably a lot to that. What's really tragic is that we especially need male teachers in early childhood education. But guess what's happening?
Never thought about that one.
Well, guess what's happening in the ranks of men who are thinking about early childhood education?
Pushed out. They don't know anything about it. They're assumed.
They're hearing horror stories.
Oh, crap.
Of how easy it is for anything they do to be misconstrued as sexual abuse of a child.
I have one example that's not really like up the lane of sexual abuse, but when I worked for the Boys and Girls Club, it was super easy to get in trouble if I didn't prevent somebody from fighting. Like, if I could not prevent two kids from doing something, I was immediately under fire. Even if I separated them, just the fact that it happened, you're already done. Like, so these are like weird things that as males you have like a higher standard to like uphold order. It's kind of hard. Like, there's a lot more scrutiny. The younger the kids are, the younger that they are.
Double standard.
Wow.
So the women teachers wouldn't be expected to be able to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, it would get away with it of like, well, what were they expected to do? But meanwhile, should have done something in that moment, and now I'm at fault. And I'm like, wow, I really got, like, I couldn't even react fast enough in some of these situations because I couldn't believe what was happening, Or you might think it's just they're playing around, and by the time you do realize, oh, it's a little more serious, too late. They're already, some parents pissed. You're getting a call later, you just don't, never know. So that's my example.
Yeah. Did you ever get the feeling that you were valued particularly for your membership and experience with male culture?
Actually, yeah, because when I got involved in the sporting aspect of it, the kids respected me and had a lot more fun. And they were more like, I don't want to say obedient, but they respected me and like didn't mind whenever I would tell them to do things because I'm relating to them. Like, I'm their friend now. We're playing a sport together. It's also just, health-wise, it's a good incentive to get involved with kids. I mean, you're active, you're playing sports. So that in itself. I also run a nonprofit though, and I made a lot of good connections just playing basketball at the apartment complex basketball court. Just kids coming by, and then like, you'd be surprised how far camaraderie can get you, right? Like, a little bit of competitiveness. I think everybody needs that, and it's lacking in a lot of people's lives. Just to know that you're good at something, right? It doesn't matter what it is. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like that what you just said makes a lot of sense. I mean, what is a game other than an opportunity for the other team, provided by the other team, for you to get to show how good you are?
Yeah, everybody gets to be a hero, right? Or an opportunity in some aspect. You get the ball, now's your time.
Yeah, you get a chance to excel.
Yeah.
Without the other team being there to try to keep you from excelling,
that's true.
You wouldn't have a chance to show that you can excel, which is, I think probably a piece of male culture that is luckily and happily becoming more of a piece of female culture, because female sports has been a very good thing.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, it's a very female thing, I think, very unfortunate aspect of female culture to view competition in a negative light. Oh, you men are always competing. Well, yeah, we're trying to show how good we are. I'm trying to give him a chance to show how good he is, because I'm going to give him a hard time. It's not because I hate him. It's because I got to provide a bedrock for him to build on.
Which is another thing that guys can like jokingly pick on each other, and women aren't likely to do such a thing, right? Like different type of humor, everything altogether.
I think so. Intent,
our underlined intent with guys is kind of women wouldn't understand it, right? It's like our own language in that aspect.
Maybe they do understand it, but they're jealous of it. Maybe. And there were things about female culture that I know I'm jealous of.
Yeah.
Where women
the fact
get
that they can bond together, right? Such a tight pack.
Yeah. Yep. They can hug each other, lean their heads on each other's
rely
shoulders.
on each other.
Yeah. But that's the shadows. The shadow side of that is the poor baby. The sisterhood thing where it's absolutely okay for you to do whatever you wanted to do, and I'll back you up.
Damn.
And that I think is one of the things that men most disrespect about women.
That's a good point, I guess, because it's kind of putting your selfish personal interest above like doing the right thing in that aspect. Like, do you have morals, or are you just going to listen to what other people tell you? Can you think for yourself? That's a good point. Talk about radio a little bit before we finish this, because that's a long career. What was that like? Do you have was that like a lot of call-ins? Were you getting paid? What was this? Is it a hobby?
Yes, it was a hobby. That's all it was.
Nice.
It was on a college radio station north of Baltimore. It was a public radio station. I think they had a couple of feeds from NPR, but it was a college station, and in that sense, it was a public station. It was also student run. It was part of the communications curriculum. And they had a public service block in the evening. And programming was really just sort of crazy. Like no professional money-making program director, who has to watch the ratings would ever do this. But they gave me a show, I think at 7 p.m, I think, once a week. And the lead into my show, the show before my show, was like 3 hours of punk rock music.
Oh wow!
So it wasn't exactly like,
like you knew what was coming.
It wasn't like, the audience that was there for the 3 hours of punk rock music was like real eager to stick around. Yeah, let's talk about men's issues now.
Yeah.
So that's just how crazy it was. So I did the show from 83 to 89. I paid for it out of my pocket. The expenses weren't great. I mean, I didn't have to, pay for the studio or anything. But, little bit of advertising I did was, me doing, this was back in the day, mailing out postcards.
Mm-hmm.
Paper postcards with stamps on them. That cost money.
Was that trying to get viewers? Is that what that was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Buying ads in the alternative paper.
Yellow Book days.
Yellow Book. God. you know about the Yellow Book.
Yeah. I had a landline. I was old enough to remember that.
You really?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, I still have one. Right back here.
Nice.
Hey.
Not switching.
Well, my wife and I are we're, getting up there. And I think we sort of feel like even if the electricity goes out, the landline still works.
Wow, that's a good point. That's
of course, it wouldn't with this one because it's a cordless. It's a cordless, wireless. But we could just run upstairs and plug it into the jack. We could plug a real phone, an old phone, into the jack, and we'd be good. So yeah, that's probably why we think it's sort of safer for communication if the electricity ever goes out.
Do you have any crazy guests on your show?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, I had some crazy ones. I had Gloria Steinem. You know that name?
Mm-mm.
Okay. She was very big icon of the early feminist movement. She was pretty cool, actually. She became a Playboy bunny.
Wow.
just to sort of go underground to see what the life of a Playboy bunny was like. And I think she wrote a book about it.
Wow.
So she was, and she's also said some really good things about men, just like Betty Friedan did. They were early feminists. And Gloria Steinem's still around. I think she's still around. I had Gloria Steinem. I had Phyllis Schlafly. You know who Phyllis Schlafly is?
I don't.
She's the chief opponent of the Equal Rights Amendment.
Wow.
And the reason she wanted to oppose the Equal Rights Amendment isn't because she didn't want women to have power. It's because she believed women already had more power than men, and equality would take power away.
Whoa.
I had Ed Asner, because he was sort of a friend of an organization I like. It's called the National Coalition for Men. Ed Asner was an advisor to it. Who else did I have? I guess those are the big names I remember. And then, a lot of professors and authors and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So I tried, we can end on this theme, actually. So I tried, the show became the most popular public affairs show on that station, which, probably wasn't saying much, but it was. I mean, it was a call-in show, and we had people calling in. People liked it. I mean, it was, it was a niche, and there were enough people, to fill that niche. So I did it from 83 to 89, and then I decided I wanted to try to take it commercial so that I wouldn't, have to pay for it myself. It could even maybe get paid some money myself.
Like a Howard Stern kind of thing?
Well, no, it was not a shock jock thing at all. It was sort of studious and serious, and I would talk to professors and book authors, and
but that level, were you aiming for that kind of success though? Like that level that was my example, like Howard Stern kind of level.
Oh no, I would not want to be like Howard Stern.
Got you.
No, I started out sort of with Phil Donahue in mind. Do you know that name?
Yeah, I know the name, just not the person.
Phil Donahue, for your audience, let's just say he was a TV talk show host in the genre of like Oprah a little bit. Having guests on a daytime thing. So He was very much targeting women. And so he would do a lot of stuff about relationships and stuff like that. So I wanted my show to be about relationships. And so I was sort of thinking, let's see what we can do to make things better in relationships by paying attention to the male point of view. So that's, I started out that way, but it very quickly became clear that there were serious social problems, and not just, in male-female relationship friction, but very serious social problems connected with what's really going on with men and boys. So the show became pretty popular, pretty successful. I got a demo tape to the president of a local commercial station. He liked it, brought me in. We had a meeting, sounded like it was going to go well, that he was going to program me on his station. But it turned out that the program director, the one who actually was in charge of programming, said, no, we're not going to take this show. And the reason is, guess what? Women wouldn't like it.
Wow.
And because women wouldn't like it,
came full circle with that one.
Yes, that's we can end on this note. Women wouldn't like it, and so therefore the advertising sales staff wouldn't be able to sell the show to any advertisers because the advertisers would be afraid that women wouldn't like it.
Wow.
And so I guess if there's, if we want to end on a note here,
name the episode Women Wouldn't Like It.
Yeah. Yeah.
But before we do end it though, you have to say what more than rich means to you as well.
It means more than making money. I mean, and I'm sure that's hope that's what just about everybody says, right? Yeah. And it's so at this tender age of my life, I am old enough to realize the wisdom of what I heard throughout my life, but I probably didn't believe, is that the most important thing in your life is your relationships. Especially in terms of being happy and, to that extent, successful in your life. Having people like you, trust you, want to be with you, work well with you, ask you to join them in their endeavors. I mean, that's fulfillment in a big way. So yeah, it's more than rich in money would be rich in relationships.
Was there any last thing you wanted to say on your last sentence before I cut you off?
Well, I just want to say probably that the most important thing that anybody who likes what we're talking about today could do if they want to make it more common to think about these things and to want to take action to make them less problematic would be that the number one people who could do this, could make a big difference because they got the credibility on it, is women.
Wow.
And they can be feminist women. They just got to be real feminist women.
Wow. The original meaning of the word.
Yeah. I mean, true women who want to carry feminism forward and not stop at the point where
the ones that care more about actual progression of humanity as opposed to their self-interest.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And of course the nasty feminists will say, instead of just whining and complaining about women, why don't you just do it yourself? Women have their own movement. Why don't men just have their own movement instead of just complaining? And I would say, and I do say,
they have a lot of power.
Well, the situation for men and women is very different. If you were to be looking across a field at two prisons and you saw hundreds of inmates streaming out of one, breaking the chains, knocking down the fences, and saying, "We will not be imprisoned anymore," and then watching them scatter and go wherever they want to go and try to improve their situation. And then we're to look at the other prison and see that it ain't moving an inch. It is locked down as tight as ever. Would you be able to conclude that the first one is really a very terrible place, and that's why the women were so eager to get out of it? And the reason men aren't trying to get out of their prison is because it's not really a prison, it's a country club.
Wow. It's crazy.
Or would you conclude that maybe this is a minimum security prison over here, and that's a maximum security prison over there?
That's super ironic because I've seen those stories about men purposely changing genders to get into the female prisons. And then I've even seen that because they're considerate and they don't impose on the women, like going in their locker rooms and stuff, that the women will like build. I don't know if this was another country, but the women will accommodate that guy for being considerate and not like intruding. So they'll build the guy his own custom, whatever, like laboratory restroom, things like that, just for being respectful to the women. But he's also taking advantage of the fact that, hey, I can just say that I'm transgender and go get the same treatment as the women are getting, because they're realizing what you're saying, right? Like the differences in the treatments. Yeah.
He's a soft inmate.
Just taking advantage of the system, you know?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. But it's a good way to wrap it. I definitely appreciate how much one of my longest podcasts for sure. So I hope a lot of people can gain from this. Any links to your websites, anything you want to share?
Well, I appreciate it, Joe. It's really been fun talking with you. You've been a great interviewer. Let's see. So, the center of the online center of my stuff right now is malefriendlymedia.com. All one word, malefriendly, no hyphens, just malefriendlymedia.com. And that will show links to a bunch of stuff I've done. At Medium, on medium.com. And also I'm on substack.com. I think you could probably search by my name if you wanted to. But I think I've got links to those from Male Friendly Media. Not sure.
You got any social media, LinkedIn or anything?
I'm an old guy, and I got to tell you, really, no, it's a generational thing, I'm sure, but really and truly, the whole idea of Twitter and Facebook and social media gives me the willies. It gives me the creeps. It really does. You know, just people. I don't, like, how many followers do you have? And a follower can mean somebody went click one day.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it
doesn't mean they're loyal or anything.
and tweets, so many tweets are just so vacuous. Just like, congratulations to Joe on his promotion. You know, it's just, just trying to get out there just to, hey, well, look at me. And of course, I guess I'm doing the same thing, but I hope a little more substantively.
Yeah, all the stuff I do, I'm making jokes on the internet. Like, I try not to be serious. And then if I make you laugh, hopefully I get a follow from it. So that's my strategy. I try to provide value.
That's good.
That's
good. That's good. Comedians deserve followers.
Didn't consider that, but yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
Awesome, Jack. I appreciate it. Any last words?
No, just looking forward to getting a chance to listen to what we said and what we talked about, and hope it came through okay. And wouldn't it be great if some women heard this podcast and got together and said, let's do something, and took feminism forward.
It's a good hope. I like it.
That would, yeah.
Awesome, Jack.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be in touch. I'll keep you updated when this comes out soon.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Bye.